Alright, so for the second set of forms here, we've got a slightly more complex form that's built up of several of our basic shapes. So again, what we're going to do is we're always going to start with the same procedure. Let's figure out its height. Alright, so its height compared to the journal, alright, we got it about this big. So I'm going to establish those tick marks, and again, I can kind of look at it this way. Here's the top, here's the bottom, and then again, always want to establish that line of symmetry. So again, light lines. I'm holding my pencil at the back edge, and I'm establishing a line, very, very light. That's going to be the line of symmetry. Now let me look at its width. Okay, so from the middle of that, I've got the width about here, so that's going to give me an overall width at the widest point, about here. Now let's look at the basic shapes. What is the most basic shape that we can see here in its largest form? So there are, as I said, there's several basic shapes, but in this case, if I look at the widest point and I look at this shape here, okay, this is part of a sphere. Alright, so what I want to do there is I want to kind of look and see how high that sphere goes. So if I just kind of take my pencil, I can see that it kind of goes up to here, and I can see that the bottom of the sphere kind of comes down to here. Alright, so I've just established a few basic parameters for the width of my sphere. Now again, I want these blocking shapes to be very light, so I'm going to actually start just by using the side of my pencil and establishing that sphere so that it hits those widest points, top and bottom, left and right. Alright, very, very lightly. Now I want to look at the width of the base. Okay, I can see the base is a little bit narrower. So the width of the base is a little bit narrower than the width of the sphere. And if I look at this shape here, right, I've got that ellipse at the bottom. It's curved here, but if I look at what that most basic shape is, I can see that there are two straight angled lines on the bottom edge of that bottle. So that tells me if those are straight, they're going to kind of come up straight and hit that center line, and that tells me that this shape here is a cone. So I want to match that degree of curve right here. Again, my blocking lines can go a little bit beyond those reference points that I made. And I can establish the cone that makes up the base. Now, I have another cone here. If you look, again, even though these are curved, these start to curve. The basic angle, the most basic shape here is another cone. So I look and see where the bottom ellipse of that cone is, and I establish the degree of curve. It's getting closer to my eye level so that it's not quite as curved. And then I'm going to establish, just from the widest point here, you can see it kind of comes in a little bit, I'm going to establish this cone here. Because I'm looking at it not from this line here, but I'm looking at it from the edge of the sphere. So I got that cone there. Now the last shape is this tall shape, which is above my eye level. Notice, because the top of the bottle curves downward. So that top ellipse is going to be downward this way. And then the most basic shape, if I look at this and I kind of draw lines straight down, even though it tapers and comes out, the most basic shape for that is a cylinder. So that is the blocking form for this bottle. Now as I move over to this shape here, I'm again going to establish the height. So the bottom is here, the top is here, line of symmetry, always establish that line of symmetry. And now if I look at this shape, these lines are not straight up and down, right? You can see that the edges of this form are slightly leaning in. If I look at it right off the bat, I'll say, yeah, that's a cylinder. Certainly that is a cylinder. It's obvious that's a cylinder. But it's actually a tapered cylinder. So the taper kind of curves in. So theoretically, this would be a really, really long cone, okay? But we're going to call it a tapered cylinder because the angle at which it tapers is very, very subtle. So now I want to figure out the width of the base. So I've got the width of the base. I want to figure out the width of the height, right? So the width of the height, and where that is, okay, here's the lid, where the lid hits the top of the rim. And I can see that that is a little bit wider. So the width of the rim, and again, this is all relative. It's going to potentially change a little bit as I start to block out the rest of the forms. Now this width is the width of the overall base. I want to find out where this line is. Okay, that is the bottom of the tapered cylinder, and then this is the series of other shapes that are below it. There's 1, 2, 3 different shapes that make up this base. Alright, so now I want to use those marks, and I want to use these marks here, right? I want to create the marks for this point and this point right here. Those have to be slightly outside of these. Right? I just said that it's a tapered cylinder. So those lines are going to be, those little hash marks are going to be just outside of these marks. That's going to give me my taper. So if I start here and come down, look how light that line is. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. It's not a straight line, but it's just a slightly tapered line. And I can see that I have a restatement over here. And I'm a little bit more accurate on that edge there. So I'm going to kind of just clean that up a little bit. Alright, so there's the taper of that form. Now, let's look at the shape of the ellipses and the shapes that make up the base. This, obviously, we can see that ellipse, and what's the degree of curve there. Now, I have said I had 3 shapes down here. If you look, there's real close. Right here, I can see that there's a vertical, skinny little vertical, almost like a coin on its side. So that's going to be a really, really flat cylinder. So if I look at that, and I make my vertical line there, and then I establish another light ellipse here, and another light ellipse here, that gives me that flat coin. Now I can see it's got a little bit of a curve. So if I have that curve coming here, that's not a straight line, that's a curved line, that's a curved line. So right on the edge of this here, alright, you can see a little bit of that coin going around the back. Right here, I have a hemisphere. Kind of tough to see it there. But then I have another cylinder, and that gives me, even with the bottom edge of this, which is the bottom edge of the tapered cylinder, gives me another cylinder that comes around, kind of creates that rim, that edge there, and then there's another vertical. Alright, so I'm getting a little bit more detailed on this one just because of the amount of shapes there. Alright, so I've got a flat cylinder, I've got a hemisphere, and I've got another flat cylinder, and then that flat cylinder is sitting underneath of the tapered cylinder. Now I also have to look at that tapered cylinder, and I can see that there's 2 sections, or 3 sections that are divided by 2 ribs. Let me figure out where those ribs are. So the one rib is here, the other rib is going to be here, and you notice this is below my eye level, this is just below my eye level. So I want to establish that rib here, and you notice that the rib goes beyond the edge of the wall. So the rim here, that curved rib, has a little bit of a bump that sticks out there. Same thing up here. So a little bit of a bump that sticks out. It has to go beyond the edge of the tapered wall. Now this comes up, and I can see the spout here. Okay, I've got the spout. That's actually a pyramid. So if I look at that line, where's the bottom of the spout? It's about here. Comes up, hits that rim. It comes down again, just a light pyramid. And now I've got this rim here, which is another flat cylinder at eye level. So it's just going to be a flat ellipse. And above it, I've got several shapes again. I've got this, which is a straight line, and the base is a slight curve or flat ellipse. That tells me this is a cone. So my line of symmetry might need to get a little taller now. So I've got another curve here, another curve here, because you can see I have a curve and a curve, curve and a curve, where the lid sits on the rim. And that comes up in a cone. Now here, that cone gets cut off by another line, and you can see that's not a straight line, that's a curved line right there. So that's a hemisphere right there. And then I've got two more hemispheres that make up the top. One's a little bit bulkier than the other one, and then the other hemisphere sits on top. Notice the flat edge of them, they're all flat. The bottoms are all flat because they're at eye level. And that is the basic blocking for those two forms. This one is actually the most complex form of all of them because there's so many different shapes stacked on this one. As well, we can now see the inside. So the transparency of this is going to be something that we're really going to take a look at and focus on when we start with setting this one up. So let's do the same thing we did with the others. All right, I'm going to set up my journal here, and I'm going to just establish the same three things first. I'm going to establish the height, an understanding of the width, and then the blocking techniques, the basic shapes. What are the basic shapes that make that form up? All right, so the height, I'm going to come about here. All right, if I take my pencil, come across at the top of the picture and the bottom of the picture. And again, always the height. I want my line of symmetry so I can establish the center of the form. Now, what's the width of the form? So if I take the width of the form, bring it over, okay, I'm about here to about here. That's the widest point that I'm looking at right there. All right, so the widest point is here and here. Where's that skinny part here, the widest point? I'm going to establish now, before I do anything else, I'm going to establish what the basic shape is. And if I look at it, what does it appear to be? It's a sphere, right? No straight edges, no verticals, no converging lines. It's a sphere. So I've got my widest point of my sphere here, all right? And you can see that the sphere comes up. I'm going to, again, use my arm lightly to draw. So I'm using my arm this way to draw that sphere. And it's not going to be perfect the first time. That's why I'm going to draw multiple spheres, and I'm using my shoulder to draw the sphere, and my shoulder is creating the movement of that form. So I've got the widest points of the sphere here, got the lower point of the sphere. Now I can also see that the base has a certain elliptical shape. Okay, so I established the elliptical shape. It's actually right at my eye level. So if I look at the top, I don't see down inside of it. So the ellipse is going to be pretty flat, straight across. Also want to see how far off, how much sphere is outside of that. So this is the widest point on the left here. And what's the widest point? You see the spout here. That's going to be another form, or it's going to be another basic shape. So if I look here, I have the same distance over here as to where the spout starts. And where that shape, what shape is that? What shape is that? Is this a straight line? No, this is a curve, it's a diagonal line. So that diagonal line comes down, and then this diagonal line comes down, so that would be a cone. And this would also be a cone. Or this side would be the other side of the cone. All right? Simple enough. Now, what am I looking at here? I've got a line that's this way for the spout, and then another, it's a curved line, but if I look at, again, at the basic shapes, if I draw a straight line and a straight line, I've got a pyramid shape for the spout. All right, so there's my spout. And then, of course, the handle. So the handle is about here, comes to about here, and then just establishing the shape of that. That's it, guys. That's blocking. I found the basic shapes. The next part of the exercise is we're going to go back in and we're going to talk about line. And we're going to talk about how line use can be used to kind of flesh out the objects and make them a little bit more overall finished. So in case of finishing this up, this is actually a tapered cylinder. It's a modified cylinder. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the teapot. I'm just going to block in the basic shape of the cylinder. Now it goes behind. All right, the handle is behind the widest portion of that part of the pitcher. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as it is, and I can see that the base here, I've got this and this. All right, that's the blocking for the pitcher. Now let's move over to this much more complex form in this lantern. Okay? Much more complex form in this lantern. This is a line drawing, a blocking line drawing of the lantern that I did with a tracing. Okay? Look at the form itself. I put this up because you can see it's a cube. All right? That's obvious. It's a cube. It's the basic shape. But you notice these angles here. All right, that's actually a pyramid shape on top of that. And there's also the same thing at the base, right? It has that cut edge. Well, it doesn't have that cut edge at the bottom. It does here. So it has that pyramid at the bottom where there's the horizontal coming straight across. So I did that there. You can see I have that additional surface plane here and here. So I've got a vertical surface plane on the right side, I've got a vertical surface plane on the left side, and then I have this diagonal surface plane, which would be the really, really skinny area of the pyramid, and then I've got cylinder, cone, cylinder, hemisphere. And then the base is made up of cylinder, cylinder, cylinder. Okay? So let's set that one up with blocking. Again, I'm going to look at my height. Here's the top of the hemisphere there. Here's the bottom. All right. I need my line of symmetry, using my arm to draw straight up and down. All right. I also want to know where the top of the cube is. So the top of the cube is approximately here. All right. That's this top edge of the cube, because again, we just established that the basic shape of this is a cube. So if this is my line of symmetry, how much further over is that and that part of the cube? So let me see. I go like this. I can come here, and I got a little mark there, a little mark here. Okay, so that's the widest point of the cube. So I'm going to draw my vertical, and draw my other vertical in. Now, what are the converging lines? This is where students can sometimes get confused. I'm looking at this in two-point perspective because I can see the converging lines. I can see the converging lines going back in two directions. So I need to now establish that front corner. So if this is my line of symmetry, just off of that is my front corner. And then where is the bottom of the cube? The bottom of the cube is approximately there. Now those lines are not accurate because they're not in perspective, right? You see the angle of those lines going back in space? They need to be curved. I'm just giving myself the height of that main part of the cube. So now that I have the corner here, now I can take my pencil and I can hold it on the angle that that line is going back. And I can bring my pencil over and I can see that the converging line is going back in that direction. I have a parallel line up here, so if I hold my pencil on this and bring it over to there, I can see that it's going this way. So it's parallel to this. Alright, same thing here. What angle is this going back like this? Just like that, it's going back to here. And what angle is this? Alright, if I measure this, is this wide? Again, as it goes back in space, it's appearing to get smaller. So that means that the bottom from here to here is going to go up much sharper, but it's still parallel to that. Alright, now you notice here that there's a window on top of the cube. So I've got an additional vertical line here. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. I still want to just put together some of these basic shapes. So let me get the rest of, so how much higher now? I want to look at that. What's the angle of the pyramid? Short. Okay, so I'm taking the angle here. What's the angle on this? This way. And this is right in front of us, so the angle here is going to kind of meet in the middle. And then this is going to go back to there, and this is going to go to here. So that's that angle on the top. Now the angle on the bottom is not that pronounced, so I'm not going to worry about that. What I am going to look at now is the base. You see the cylinder is pretty much the same width all the way through. So if I look at the cylinder for the base, I can see that the cylinder for the base is this wide, right, off of this line of symmetry. It comes down to about here, and then there's another one here, and then another one here. Okay, so this is the base. So I have that vertical, the widest point right there and there. See, the width is actually a little bit narrower. A little bit narrower than the overall size of the cube. Right, from there to there, there to there. And then I've got another one. You can see it goes around. So I have another cylinder that goes to here. So just, you know, keep looking at the forms. Alright, so now I have the three cylinder base. And now I got to look at the short cylinder up here. This short cylinder is the same width as this cylinder down here, so if I come up, I can see that this line comes in, meets up with this, and here it's very shallow. What's the ellipse on this? That we said is a cone. Okay, that's a cone. So that's going to come up to that line of symmetry, lightly. And then I've got a cutaway ellipse. This is at eye level. And then I have the hemisphere. Now I went up a little bit above my vertical here, but I think it's accurate. Okay, so I'm not going to go much further on that. This has to come over a little bit. In my hemisphere. Now I've got to look at the windows. Alright, the window on this one comes off the edge. So I have another line that's parallel and another front corner. Right, you see how that's in perspective? I can see the thickness of the window. It goes off the edge. So there's going to be a parallel line there. Another vertical comes down. See these lines, they have to be parallel. to these lines. That's the window on the right side. Now the window on the left, it's parallel to this. It does not go beyond the edge, so that means I have to drop this window frame there, and the base of it has to be parallel to that. So I'm basically drawing a rectangle inside of a rectangle. That's all I'm doing, a rectangle inside of a rectangle. Following the frame, following the outer edge so that it's symmetrical. Verticals are vertical, converging lines are converging in the correct direction. And then of course the inside frame, even though it's rounded, I'm just going to make it a rectangle for now. And look at that, my line of symmetry frame caught perfectly on that. So there's the outside. Now I need to establish the inside. So look at where that is. That's even with this. It's a vertical. What's the angle on this going back? This is parallel to this. So it goes back and meets up with the vertical. I've got another vertical here. And this goes back from this corner like that. And then there's the inside edge right here. Alright, so that one's a much more complex form that you got to look at. And of course there's the, I'm not worried about the handle right now. That starts from here and then comes down. Alright, but this is the goal, is to be able to see all of that basic stuff in looking at the basic shapes and blocking techniques. Alright, so these three, or these two, and these two are going to be what your next turned in blocking technique grade is going to be for.